February at the University of Berkeley, former Breitbart commentator Milo Yiannopoulos shut down after protesters threw rocks and Molotov cocktails. And just last month, when Ben Shapiro spoke at the University of Berkeley, local authorities spent more than $500,000 on security.
It's amazing they had to essentially lock that place down for you.
And the headlines were nuts. I mean, the headlines like, Berkeley braces for Shapiro visit. Really? Was I the one who's going to be smashing ATMs?
I recently watched a video where you were talking about a reporter who let their son go to school wearing a dress.
Yes.
And so for me, I think the main issue when it comes to transgender and people getting confused is not basically where
Today, Junior?
So for that boy, if that child knows that he's a boy, and he goes to school, I'm not trying to be emotional.
No, it's fine.
And he understands that, and his parents are just like, yeah, just remember, you're a boy. I understand the whole bullying thing you were talking about, but wouldn't it confuse the child more if you say, hey, you can't do these things because these are specifically girl things, even though this child who's a boy and realizes he's a boy?
No, if I'll answer the question, then you can tell me whether I'm getting to your question. Okay. So my feeling is that as a parent, and a parent of young kids, that it is my job to educate my kids about life. It is not my job to let my children make autonomous decisions about which they know nothing, because kids are really stupid. And I say this as the father of two. I mean, when I say that my 4.5-year-old daughter is smart, I mean for a 4.5-year-old. I don't mean overall. Because she just doesn't know enough about how the world works. And not only that, the reality is that cultures across time and space have differentiated between the dress of males and females. Now, there are folks who say, well, male dress in American society may look like female dress in some other societies. That's fine, but that's not how it is in the United States, meaning that we all sort of accept that there is a binary dress code, at least to a certain extent, in terms of how boys and girls dress. And if you want to confuse your child, then the best thing to do is take a 6-year-old kid and say to them, yeah, go ahead and wear a dress to school. And I don't feel like I'm discriminating against my 2.5-year-old son when I offer him another option or when I encourage him to take that other option. So for example, my 2.5-year-old son, he's got an older sister, and his older sister wears all sorts of frilly things, and they're very shiny and they're very sparkly. And so he's very fond of going into her closet and taking out her shoes and putting them on. Okay, and after him doing this for a little while, I said to him, no, you're not allowed to wear those shoes. Those are your sister's shoes. Those are girl things. This is not evil. This is not terrible. This is called being a parent. And when finally, after he did it a little bit, I said to him, why don't we, you know what? I'm going to take you out. We're going to get you new shoes. We went to the Cowboy Western store, and we got him boots. He will not take off his boots. The moral of the story is that kids like cool stuff, regardless of whether it is stereotyped male or female, and that it is not a terrible thing to reinforce certain cultural stereotypes that are going to make your kid happier, safer, and more comfortable. And confusing them about gender is not just, let's say that you are the world's most open-minded parent. You say, listen, I don't want to be part of any of these dress stereotypes with regard to culture. Guess what? Your kid still lives in a world. Your kid still lives in a world full of other people who are trying to reinforce the fact that masculinity and femininity have different qualities, and those qualities and differences are beautiful. Okay? And so when we say to parents that you're doing something wrong, if you say to your 6-year-old that he can't wear a dress to school, all I'm thinking is, you don't get to tell me how to raise my kid, particularly when, I promise you, it is a better pathway to screwing up your kid as a general statistical matter by telling them that they can dress as a member of the opposite sex when they are 6 years old, than telling them, you know what, why don't you not do that today and instead put on a pair of pants.
Indeed, just 3 hours before he's supposed to take the stage at 7 o'clock here in Utah, Shapiro says there are reports of possible violence.
I'm hearing some rumors that there may be some people who try to bring weapons tonight, which would just be ridiculous and awful. I don't want to be getting killed at my lectures.
A fellow conservative podcast host claims he's captured this undercover video of self-described Antifa members allegedly handing out knives and talking about luring fans of Ben Shapiro to their car where they allegedly had guns.
I mean, this is insanity. We'll go on for like a couple more minutes with this, and then we have to move on.
What I'm saying is that yes, we are. What I'm saying is that
If you're just one person trying to assemble pencils, you're not going to get very far. You need workers. Capital needs labor infinitely more than labor needs capital. That's why you have worker cooperatives where the workers are the
fundamentally disagree on the distinction between capital and labor. Capital is just a term for money. If you're talking about money, money does not grow from the ground. Money only has value because it was traded for labor at one point or the products of labor. So if I take my money and I buy machinery, I have invested my labor in doing that because I didn't get the money from nowhere. Even if I got it from my parents didn't get the money from nowhere. The people who built the machines required me to trade something of value to them in order for me to obtain the machines. The people who invented the machines required people to pay them in order to get the patent to that machine so they could build the machine. The problem that I'm seeing in what you're saying is you have still failed. If what you're talking about is a system of voluntarism, you still have not named any area in which we disagree, and yet you're telling me that you're a socialist and I'm a free marketer. So one of us has got this wildly wrong, and I'm pretty sure it's not me.
I'm pretty sure it is, because what I'm saying is, again, under capitalism, where we are in this employer-employee, when I say the word capital, I refer to the owners.
I don't mean to be mean, but you thought that was a nice shirt, too. But
Is racism real?
Yeah, of course racism is real. But I don't think institutional racism is necessarily real. So yes, of course there are racists. And racist cops who shoot black guys for no reason should go to jail and they should throw away the key. But this idea that's put out there by these kind of broad statements about America being a discriminatory, racist country, I don't know how that helps anything, and I don't think it's actually true.
Isn't that to ignore our history? It's inarguable that slavery existed, and after that, Jim Crow.
Yes. You want to talk about Jim Crow and slavery? Of course. The question is, what is the remedy now? Is the remedy now to blame people who are living today who had nothing to do with Jim Crow or slavery? I didn't hold slaves, did you? The hierarchy of victimhood goes something like this. If you're LGBT and Q, then we suggest that you are at the very top of the victimhood hierarchy. And then black folks, and then Hispanic folks, and then women, and then Jews, and then Asians, and then way down at the bottom, white straight males.
Does it ever strike you as somewhat off to be in a room kind of making light of victim culture and having this kind of hearty laughter and looking around and seeing that the vast majority of the faces are white?
No, because I've said the exact same thing in front of faces that were not white. So I've been very consistent about this.
I know it's not that you change your message, it's just that it seems to resonate mostly with white people.
I don't think that that's true. I mean, I think that I wish I were invited to more crowds that were more racially diverse. That'd be great.
Whether or not you agree with Shapiro, whether or not you think he's engaged in hate speech, there is little doubt that his speech is protected by the First Amendment.
They won't let a Jewish guy come to a college campus and say what he wants to say. That's where we're at in America. That's ridiculous.
At just past 6 o'clock, and with the protests heating up, Professor David Vergobi, who teaches a class on freedom of expression here, tells us that many college students today do not understand that speech is protected unless it directly incites violence.
This is a public institution. It's a government entity. They have to guarantee the free speech rights of everyone, including Shapiro.
We find the leader of that group that has vowed to shut tonight's event down, who makes a startling admission.
I don't think he should speak.
But that doesn't really comport with the First Amendment.
I don't care.
You don't care?
I don't care.
Why not?
I don't think that's a relevant document right now.
The Constitution is not a relevant document? This thinking may help explain the increasingly violent protests against conservative speakers on campus.
The Hollywood director and the producer, Judd Apatow, he tweeted this out. He's talking about the president. He says he's a Nazi. He wants no judicial process. He kidnapped children and commits acts of violence for political gain and to support his racist views. He admires violent dictators. Trump is a Nazi. The debate is over. Soon we will have proof he is a Nazi supported by the Russians. Your reaction?
I mean, delusional nonsense. Read a damn book. But unfortunately, in Los Angeles, this has sort of become the way people think. Because it's a water cooler town and everybody thinks the same way, you can say crazy things like Trump is a Nazi and get away with it. If Trump were a Nazi, does Judd Apatow really think that he'd be able to go on Twitter and say stuff like this? The Nazis were not famous for their tolerance of dissent, particularly in this sort of manner.
So your view is this is political correctness run amok?
Yeah, I mean, it's the furthest extension of political correctness. That when you say something, that it's not just me disagreeing with you, it is me destroying your identity as a human being in a way that is akin to violence.
Let me just read you from the statement that the folks who want to shut you down put out. They said, Ben Shapiro has openly called transgender people mentally ill. He portrays the great gay rights movement as a conspiracy to root out God-based institutions. He has recently defended conversion therapy, which is nothing short of abuse.
Okay, so there are a bunch of things that are just not true there. I am unaware of any time that I have ever defended conversion therapy as such, said that it's effective, because I don't see the evidence that it's effective.
What about this idea that you call transgender people mentally ill?
I do say that transgenderism is a mental illness because it's gender dysphoria. It's a psychological disorder. So that's not an insult to people who suffer from psychological disorders. You are not doing a service to people who are suffering from a mental disorder to humor them by suggesting that their mental disorder is reflected in objective reality.